in sales, there's some people that are born for it and some people that are much more natural. You know, what was the kind of story like for you? Because I look at you now, you know, you're super like charismatic, you're very well put together, you're very polished, you're very tailored. Was it always kind of something like this for yourself?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So growing up, I never thought I'd be in sales. I never thought I'd be good at sales. Never saw myself even choosing to be a career. And early on, I actually grew up very, very introverted. And for anyone who's ever seen any of my videos or followed any of my content, they might be like, that's doesn't seem like you at all. But I actually grew up very, very introverted. I grew up with a speech impediment, didn't start speaking English, couldn't speak properly, had a major speech impediment for the first several years of my life. I actually went through speech therapy until I was 8 years old.
No
And that was
way.
something I struggled with. So because of that, I got made fun of. It was hard for me to speak and talk, etc. So growing up, you're just embarrassed. You don't want to talk. So seeing myself today where I film videos, I do podcasts, I do webinars, I speak on stages. I'm like, I would never imagine that to ever happen. That's not my wildest dreams. Now, it wasn't like an overnight thing that suddenly I got into this. It was kind of like little micro things, like over time, and build a little bit of confidence, learn how to talk to people, build that up, whatever. Now, in other roles I had in the past, just going to school and like working, whether it was working at my parents' restaurant at a young age to working in a retail store selling speedo accessories. You start like you learn how to kind of talk to some people, and I was always pretty good at like just having conversations with people as I developed over time. So someone would come into the speedo store, I'd have a conversation, not realize to do a mini discovery, and then I'd upsell them more stuff without even realizing, because I'm just trying to be
Yeah.
helpful, right? So that was kind of some of the instinctual things, but it wasn't because I was good at selling. It was more so I just want to help them. They would come in, say, I have, my son is a competitive swimmer and he wants to, he needs a new suit for practice. I'll just ask more questions and realize they actually need some other things, and I'll make better recommendations. That's all I would do, which I didn't realize really the premise of a discovery call, and then basically a demo and a close. Didn't realize that. So
And bear in mind, you were also like letting them talk through their problem statement at stage and work through their
100%.
own problems and
That's right.
create, not necessarily create issues, but essentially like understand their problems more to be able to be better in those buying decisions.
That's right, 100%. So it even got to the point where my next, like probably more of a real selling role, I was an intern now. This is like a couple years later. So I was like 20 years old. I was an intern now, still going to school full time because I pay for school myself. And one of my responsibilities is at a car rental agency, a really big one of the biggest in the world. And my job was when people come in, they rent a car because they got in a car accident, maybe they're on vacation, they need a rental car for some reason, is I'll have to sell them the car insurance, or I'll have to upgrade them into a more expensive vehicle. And I just did what I was told, and I broke a bunch of records, and I sold more than anybody else. Not because I was any like better. I thought I was doing what people told me to do. My bosses were telling me to do, and had more success. So I kind of thought, okay, maybe I'm kind of okay with the sales thing. And that later on, that same big company opened a new division in Oregon, where I'm based out of, and it was new B2B. So this is like now is like it wasn't B2C anymore. It was B2B, going like outbound, zero clients, zero anything, zero marketing. Like, hey, good luck. Like, we're bleeding money and we need you to go and get new business. That's what it was. So that was like, now this is like my first real B2B. And that's when I realized how hard sales was. Like, I literally started, and they gave me this manual written by people that never sold this before, and a bunch of outdated stuff, right?
That's
And
always the case.
but I'm like, great, awesome. Like, my boss never done the job before, super old school, never done the job before. Like, he was a military guy, just like grind it out. That was his mindset, much older than me. And he said, so I remember like the first day, I'm like, hey boss, like, what should I do? He's like, okay, I want you to go and knock on doors. I'm like, what does that even mean? He's like, I want you to go outside, walk out the building, walk down the street, go get 30 business cards, see if you can book some meetings, close some deals. So this is like my first real taste of like, I've never prospected before. So I never made a cold call, never sent a cold email, never walked in by foot to a business trying to solicit them for business. See, so I said, okay. He said, go to 30 at least. I'm like, okay, cool. So I walked in I walked to over 60 that day, didn't close a single deal, didn't book a single meeting, generated zero interest. I'm like, oh man, Okay. I'm like, well, but I was pretty good in my other role. So I'm sure it's just like, it's a numbers game as I hear, the more
Yeah.
hands you shake, the more money you make, So next day, I did it again. I went out again. I walked into over 60 businesses again. Same result, nothing. No book meetings, zero interest, zero closed deals. At this point now, I walked into over 120 businesses. I had zero. I literally had a less than 1% conversion. There was a no conversion, a 0% conversion. I'm like, this makes zero sense. Went to my boss. So what should I do, boss? He said, pick up all those business cards and call every single one. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Like this must be how it's done, right? So that next day, I call every single one. Again, zero results. I asked him again, like, what should I do? Again, zero results. So at this point now, I had walked in over 120 businesses. I had cold called as well on the phone. All those cards made over 240 calls and booked zero meetings. So I'm like, how is it possible I have like less than a 1% conversion? It was a 0% conversion. Like, how is it possible I converted? This makes zero sense. And the whole time, like, I'm seeing some of my peers, some are booking meetings, some have closed deals, who were not even doing a fraction of the effort I was doing. And I remember at that weekend, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not made for sales. I was not born for sales. So to answer your question, I did not believe I was born for sales. I had to figure it out eventually. And over time, I was able to get better at sales.
Yeah, it's that process of doing something that you're really shit at, and then just seeing, do you have like small traits? I think that's really important though, because like, for instance, like you had a small success when you were working with individuals, B2C, and then as you go to B2B, it's like a new stream, but you at least have a bit of confidence, maybe. What did you learn from?
I did when I started.
You did when you started, exactly,
Yeah,
but you get through it. What do you think you learned about like kind of human psychology, even when you're with B2C or B2B, like when you're working with people? What did you see during the early days? When there's 120 blank responses, like was there some sort of trends or similarities you could kind of find with different people in terms of what their issues are or what they kind of wanted?
So good question. So one of my early issues early on, especially when I was walking all these businesses, and what happens is you don't really think about it, but when you in hindsight it becomes crystal clear. So early on, we kind of discussed or we started this interview, but I would get one objection, and I'd be like, that must be the truth, and I'd walk away. Right, like, okay, you're right. I'm like, I'll just leave. Especially that first week. I didn't realize like smokescreen objections were a thing. So that was the big thing. Like, and when I started reflecting, obviously later on, I'm like, well, I guess that makes a lot of sense because it was just a different context. So in the retail world, that's where I came from. Someone comes in the store, I would say, hey, welcome to JD Pence. That's where I work. Welcome to JD Pence. How can I help you today? And they say, oh, I'm just browsing. Now, that's a smokescreen because they came in to spend money. Like, you don't drive to a swimsuit store. We weren't at the mall. We were at a standalone store. You don't just drive here just to browse around. You came here because you wanted to make a purchase. You're looking for something specific. So I didn't realize that was a smokescreen. Right. So now later on, I learned like, oh, like, cool. So I would just ask a few questions, kind of guide them a little bit. Hey, cool. So most people, when they come in, they're looking for usually maybe practice gear or competitive swimming gear. Is there anything particular that can help guide you so you don't waste your time looking around the whole store? And they'd be like, oh, yeah, actually look for this. Okay, cool. And now I got an opening. And now I can have a conversation, right? But I mean, the smoke screens are a little bit different than because you have a lot less. When you're doing outbound, you get way more. Right. So here I am. Like, there was the little thing that I just didn't realize. So I was creating all these objects. I would walk in. I would have like a stack of like business cards and brochures stapled together in my hand. And I'd walk in and in my suit in an industrial environment, and they'd see me, and all these objections would automatically pop in their mind. Like, okay, sales guy, shut them down.
Yeah.
So I just didn't realize how to neutralize all these things. So when we start realizing like some of the psychology in humans in general naturally have a lot of sales resistance. When you understand that, you can change your behaviors leading up to it to hopefully neutralize it and make it a little bit easier for them to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, humanize the process essentially, so that even though you are selling something, and it's funny because because you're selling something doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with that. But it's like if you come at it with the wrong approach, it may come off a bit too hard or whatnot. And people might be a bit more resistant to it. And I think what you said there about outbound is really interesting because like now we have so much data points. We
Hmm.
can, let's say if I'm selling to you and I'm selling a consulting service, I can go check out what your pain points are. I can go check out generally if your business is successful or not. I just get a good feel of it. How big is it, all this kind of stuff which you can put into the inbound, which you can put into the discovery call.
Right.
And I don't think people utilize that enough. Of course, in the sales environment, if you're working for, I don't know, let's say Salesforce, top of the word came to my head,
Mm.
people might be guided in that way. But a lot of people who are young entrepreneurs, young people like myself, are trying to do this. They don't use this information, end up doing blanket stuff, the
Right.
traditional stuff, get the objection, say, this isn't for me. Let me go back to my last job. And I think that's what we
Hmm.
need to try to change the mindset for, and using those. And it's objection is good because you can back test your approach. Look at your
Hmm.
outbound, see is your message good, see are they terrible, make a few adjustments, and yeah, kind of set yourself up for success, I suppose.
That's right.
What do you think about that in terms of like how do people plan their kind of sales process so that they're leading with the right foot?
Yeah, great question. So the truth is just with like a little bit of preparation, it creates a massive separation from you to the rest of the competition.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
a lot of people just don't take that time. I mean, because you're spot
Mm,
on. Because it doesn't take it. It could take 5 minutes. You could look some. You can just Google them, look them up on LinkedIn, and you'll find out a lot of information about them. And
mhm,
if you've been doing the game for a little bit, and you actually just study your ideal customer profile, you're gonna. They always have the same issues. Like it's always very consistent. It's like they're gonna have the same top 3 to 5 issues every single time. So if you know that to be true, then you also probably know what to be true if you have no sales calls. They try to do the same things to solve them. So now
mm,
suddenly you are able to really understand what's on their mind and what's in their head. So when you can do that, that helps you improve every part of your process, from the copy you write, from emails to how you write your framework for on the phones, to how you write your direct messages, to if you do content. It could all be adjusted to fit your ideal customer profile if you just do the preparation in advance. And the truth is, when you run enough sales calls, you start realizing you always have the same objections at the end. So I'll give you a good example. So, in 2011, I made a switch to a whole new company. And one of the common objections I was getting, which was really new to me at the time, was, "Hey, we don't sign contracts that are more than 5 years, and our contracts were 5 years to 7 years or 10 years." So, and most people would probably get 5 years and then maybe have to negotiate down to 3 years. So when I found that to be a really consistent objection, I'm like, interesting. Like I would do everything right, and the only thing holding me back was the term of the agreement. And if I knew if I was to lower my term, if I just say, hey, okay, cool, if I could do 3 years, would you move forward right now? They say, yeah, cool. If I reduced it, then I would actually hurt my commissions, and I didn't want to do that.
mm,
So when I realized it'd be a common objection, I would actually sell against it up front, and I actually end up getting 7 to 10 year contracts instead. So I'll get way beyond that because I understand to be a common objection. So I'd sell against it up front. So when it came for me to present the term, it wasn't a big deal. So when you
mm.
understand that you always have the same objection nonstop, just do it up front, because by being more prepared. And when you're more prepared, it becomes wildly easy to close deals.
Mm. Makes more sense because people are more in tune to trying to find their own kind of problems, trying to find that solution for it, and maybe doing that kind of a little back work. Even the LinkedIn is a great example because a lot of these best guys you're going to be selling to CTO, CEO level, they'll have very well published profiles, so you
Hmm.
can get to that stage a little bit easier. I want to get into some of that kind of early stage discovery as well because there's a couple of different school of thoughts, of course. When people bring them in and you're trying to set up these kind of calls, how do you really kind of outbound to a way to get that early stage call? And now I saw your video yesterday, you did some video, which is a huge advantage. So giving a personalized video, is that something you'd encourage, as well as maybe voice notes, something that's kind of different? So you mentioned in your video that you get around 10 to 15 messages a day. Me at a product owner level, so I work for a tech company, they would see me as the person to contact. I'd probably get around 5 to 10 a week, let's say.
Hmm.
I'm not as famous as you just yet, but and as a result, a lot of them are sparse. They're messages with bad copy. I don't even read them. I don't really have time to read them. Like I just wouldn't really read them. Uh, what are some of the things that you would advise in that area?
Sure. So, um, couple different trains of thought here. So when you think about it, I mean, omni-channel is something that obviously people should be doing, right? So meaning it's like when you're doing outbound of someone, if it's a good qualified prospect, so number one, have a hyper targeted list of the right people that are most likely to be good, good people that are actually going to buy your offer, your solution, your product, whatever it's going to be. That's the first piece. But then depending on where your data points are, I actually like phones first. I'm big on the phones. And the reason is this, because a lot of people, this is a big difference, right? Because of the world I grew up in, right? So I started selling in 2007, and in today's time, I find really anyone who started really selling in 2015 and after that, they love to go digital first, which is like email, direct message, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying doesn't work. I'm just saying this is what happens. But my issue is when you start with an email, or if you start with the messaging, the LinkedIn messaging, which it does work. There's nothing wrong with it. But the common objection you get is no response. I can't handle that objection. Okay, like I can't. You can't you can do bumps. You can send more value for sure. You can do all those things that they do work over time. But my number one goal is to get them on the phone. And when you think about it, what is the hardest for someone to do? Call, send an email, or send a video message, or send a message. The hardest thing is to pick up the phone and call. It requires the most nerves. It has the most highest potential rejection point. It's the scariest for most people to do. So if I understand that the average weak minded rep is scared to make a call, that means I have less competition on the phones than any other channel.
Yeah.
So how much would I assume in a wide blue ocean of no other sharks versus an ocean full of a bunch of other emails and everything else, right? So with that being said, then I'm all about the phones first, right? So phones first, right? So it could be, even from a simple cadence perspective, it might be like Monday call, leave a voicemail, the very specific voicemail. If you do my voicemail, you'll get a 70% callback rate. Wednesday, if you don't get here back, you leave another voicemail. Same voicemail, slightly modified. If they don't call back, Friday you call again. Same thing, right? My goal is to get them on the phone, because if I get them on the phone, if you know your numbers, you'll see where you can improve. You can really leverage your strength. So, for example, I know, like even my sales team, I know if my sales team gets a prospect to answer the phone, we'll book 80% of the people, if not higher, depending on the rep.
Crazy.
So when you know that to be true, the truth is because you can have a conversation, you can actually handle objections.
And you can
Versus
pass over your personality as well. You can push that other
totally
aspect, which is way more important
right.
than just the requirements of your product or service that you're selling,
100%, 100%. So it's like there's so many levels, but your tonality, your energy, your vibe, your authenticity, it's so much more powerful. So when you can do that on the phone, it cuts through the noise very quickly. So like I mentioned, like Giorgio earlier, that was my guy who went 2 months and booked 0 meetings. And then in the first month, when we started working with him, he booked 24 meetings in the first month. He was doing on emails. And there's so much room for error in email. There's so much more room for errors on emails and direct messages. But in the
Yeah.
phones, even if you botch it, you sound terrible. But if you have good energy, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I went too fast. Like what I meant was this. They can feel you're real. Like, okay, what's up? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
So
It's a
you can leverage
likability
on more.
factor as well. You know what I mean? It's
100%.
just like people will, and they may get on and say, fuck this. I don't want to work with this guy or whatever. So they
Yeah.
may not like you for the other aspect. And that's
Right.
what's funny because, man, even like podcasting is a really good example. People like, know, and trust people because they see them in long form, they see them on
Right.
video, they see their voice, and they get much more in tune with them. I don't know. I think it's
Right.
like you get much more of a buildup of a relationship. It's just something
True.
that and this is funny because when everyone's on email, so we're all doing the same thing. And this is why you should always be kind of working against the grain because
Mm-hmm.
like if everyone's doing it, it's not working. It's a perfect
That's right.
example is even like dating, man. If you're on
That's it.
Tinder, if you're on something like this, and they're all sending the same messages, but you're a different guy doing something that's kind of slightly different, that's what kind of stands out. It stands out
That's
to
it.
the best looking girl or boy who
That's right.
get hundreds of messages, and that's kind of a good analogy because like we just think that CC executives, like we can send them the message, whatever. But think of it as like a top tier model, firm, female or male. they're getting so much attention all the time. You need to do something that's abstract, something different, something that's creative. And actually, one of the guys I work with was telling me that he started writing poems for people.
Mm-hmm.
How ridiculous is this? He said it to me on a call, and I was like, what the fuck? I was
That
saying my dad
stands
the same first.
out. That
I
stands
was like,
out,
what
right?
the fuck?
Yeah.
And then he like read it through me, and I was like, this is strange, but it worked. He booked the call. He got him on the call. I think he closed it. I think he got a deal. It was like a 1 or 2 thousand MRR. So pretty good,
See,
pretty good, pretty happy with it.
so
And
that's my point. That's like that's standing out. Like that requires like effort. It's like
yeah,
the give a fuck factor, right? Like if you
yeah,
give a fuck, you actually just try to do your job well, you can stand out. And when you think about it this way, like when you think about whatever is hard for someone to do, because if it's hard for you to do, it's probably hard for everyone to do. So you probably should do it.
mm,
And that'll
yeah,
make you stand out. So I'll give you another example. So in Portland area, this is when I was a sales manager, direct team reporting to me. And I remember, one of my reps said, "Hey, look at this place." I had like he had cold called. They had one of those phone lists on the front desk. There was nobody there. It was just a phone list, had all the names of the people. And he showed me the picture he took. He's like, look at this. He's like, look at all these names on here. It had like every department, pretty big company, like $200 million company. Like all the department had names on there and their extension. And he's like, "Hey, so which one should I call? I think I'm going to call the VP of operations." That was like usually one of the key user buyers. And I'm like, "No, man, call the CEO." He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Dude, the CEO, it's right there. It's like he's right at the top. It's just call him." He's like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, I don't." I'm like, "Okay, like I'll call." So I grab the phone. I call the CEO, and the CEO answers. I'm like, "This is awesome. This is great." He answers. I do my thing, and and the CEO starts laughing. He just starts laughing, right? Because of what we sold, like I knew this guy wouldn't make any decisions. Like he may influence it kind of, but like he was so far removed. He definitely wouldn't sign. He wouldn't have zero idea what was going on at that low of a level for how they make decisions. But I knew he'd be the guy who influenced everything. So I do my thing. He starts laughing. He's like, "Man, like no one ever calls me. This is actually kind of awesome." I'm like, "I know. That's why I called you." He just laughed. He's like, anyways, he's like, "The guy you want to talk to is a VP of ops," which my rep is right. He's like, "Just tell him I told him to talk to you." I'm like, "Great." So of course, how easy it was for us to call a VP ops now. "Hey man, talk to your CEO. He said talk to you, get together with you. We close the deal within a week." Big deal, massive deal. You see, I'm like, that's my point.
The
Like
familiarity as well. Then is that he's passed it down.
familiarity.
There's association, and it's people buy from people, man. People buy from people.
Totally.
People buy from people that they trust.
That's
So
right.
when you break down that moment there, it's funny because that was the example I wanted to share with you as well. So like younger people, so a lot of people that listen to my show, um, let's say 23 to 29, let's say young ambitious people, they all face similar problems of self-worth,
Mhm.
like understanding your experience. And one of the guys that wrote in for this saying, "A challenge I face every time I have a call with an executive, CTO, VP of engineering is gaining credibility, especially as a young salesperson with 7 months into the role, when a CTO might have 20 years experience. I think of it this way: why the fuck would a CTO with 20 plus years experience trust and spend 100K per year when a person they're speaking to has less than 2 years experience in the field?"
Mhm.
What advice would you have here around imposter syndrome, starting off the close sales process and gaining that credibility with senior folks as they're vital in putting pen to paper and making the deal?
What an awesome question. And I think in general, regardless if you are like new to sales and you're that person right there, or even if you've been in sales for a long time and then you go to a whole new industry that's completely foreign to you, you're probably gonna
Mhm.
feel the same imposter syndrome. That's just understand that it's incredibly normal. So with that being said, once you understand that, one of the things that I believe every rep should do, regardless of how long they've been in the role, is they need to learn how to build massive belief in themselves, in the solution, and in everything that has to do with the product. And I'm not just saying you go and study product knowledge, right? But imagine like if you, the problem is when people start a new company, the first thing they get trained on is product. So they
Yeah.
go in, they go all this product training, and it's good. They should know the product for sure. But the mistake, what ends up happening is then they know almost too much about the product. So their confidence now is in the product. So when they get on the phone, what do they want to talk about? The product.
Yeah.
But the product is not what they buy. They buy because of the solution to a problem. So when you understand that, one of the first things you want to do is you want to build up your confidence and belief that you can deliver a solution that truly helps them. So, for example, one of the first things I would do is I would go and look for as many case studies and testimonies as possible and read each one inside and out. I want to, like, if it's videos, I watch every single video, and I want to find out what are the most common problems they're dealing with. What are they saying? How's it impact them? How do they feel? What's been the big desired result they get once they get the solution? What are the big benefits? And watch as many as possible. And if you don't have them, then go and talk to customers. Interview as many customers as possible. Uncover what was their existing state before, where were they at, and what happened after they got the solution. What's been the impact? Not just from the solving the problem, but what's been the overall impact to them, their business, their team, their employees, etc. So you start building this confidence. That's the first thing I would start doing, because once you start having that, that's gonna automatically build your belief that what you have to sell is worth it. Like, it doesn't matter you don't experience, but you have to believe it's worth it. That's the first piece. The second thing I'll do as well to really build up your confidence is just think about what are the things that you have to do consistently that when you do it makes you nervous. So whatever role if you're an SDR, that might be making calls, dealing with objections, talking to CTOs. If you're an AE, maybe it's actually doing the discovery to closing, whatever. So when you understand that, all you really need to do now is build out the perfect situation, meaning you now go and you map out what you believe you should say, just a framework. You not to be a robot, but just to so you have a framework. That's it. Okay. So, like, when you think about any great athlete, there are frameworks they master before they even play the game. So all you need is map. Like, if you're gonna make calls, how would the ideal call go? What would that opener look like? What type of objections might they offer you? What would you say if they had objections? And you go through and you map out the perfect scenario. And then you also map out what are the worst possible situations that can happen. What are all the worst things that can happen? What are all the things that can happen? And if you've been in the role for a little while, you'll know. If you don't know, you can listen to call recordings. You can listen to other people's calls. There's so many ways you can kind of figure it out. And once you have kind of mapped out, then you start practicing. So the mistake many people make is, like, they say, "Hey, I don't feel confident on the phones," but they're not willing to practice. Well, that's like saying, "Hey, I'm not confident like driving a car, so I'm not going to drive a car." So every time you drive a car, you're nervous. Well, that's stupid. Like, literally, all you have to do is get better and you got to practice it. Once you have a framework down, then you can practice it. So you take time now and you build in practice. So I'll give you a real good example. So early on, I was definitely afraid of the phones. Like, I feared rejection because I was like, my God, this is so hard. Like, everyone's going to say no to me. This is super hard. So, and I knew I would have call reluctance. I didn't know it was called that back then, but like, it was like, I'll get to the office at 8 and we have to make calls. It would take me an hour and a half, 2 hours to even pick the phone up because there was so much mental buildup to get to that point. So what did I do to help minimize some of that? Well, in my car, driving to the office, which was 45 minutes, I would role play out loud 10, 15 times my first 5 calls. And I'd go through 4 or 5 objections. So I'll mentally warm my brain up just like an athlete would warm up. So once I was on the phone, I felt much better. So when you start doing that, you become superhuman, right? So you're about to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, no, man, I could not agree with you more with this. As in, like, that aspect of even just visualization is just so important. I do it with literally everything.
Mm-hmm.
Presentations, not even sales stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Presentations that I might have the CEO met podcasts before the session. Go get a cup of coffee. I'll walk through like 6, 7 different points. How would we cascade from things? How would things not work out? How would just conversations work? And then I get way more used to it. And then as you do multiple sessions, multiple calls, you get way more natural with it. And this is the benefit of being an SD or whatever, because at the time, you can use lower value deals. And I always try to say this to some of my mentees as well, is that, like, use your first 50 calls as test runs. If they blow out, if they smoke out, that's fine, whatever. Like, they're not relevant towards you right now anyway, unless you have very hard targets, of course. But even just initial discovery calls, use them to be your test runs.
That's right.
And then just map it out and visualize it, and then try to retrospectively look. Then, like, really look at your cracks. Well, what was it? Were you too pushy? Are you pushing price, or are you not pushing price, or whatever that issue is? But visualizing it out, mapping it out, going through that process, and giving your career and your role, just thought, reflection and thought. Because I feel like we're all task, task, task. You would have got to the office at 9, not at 8. You would have put out all these messages. They would have been all kind of bullshit. And then as a
Hmm.
result, then you would have even left, you would have been in a worse position afterwards, because mentally then you feel a more objection. And mentally then
Hmm.
you feel like that you're actually not capable for this at all. Um, Takes a bit of time, of course, but I think it's more on the psychological side, the mindset side, without even on the sales side half
Oh,
the time, you
100%.
know?
The hardest territory to manage is the one right between your ears. And if you could really understand that and you start working to mold your mind, you become better. A lot of times it's not about doing more, it's about actually doing less. It's about eliminating all the distractions so you can actually buckle down and get things done. And also if you anticipate your own weaknesses, then you work around your weaknesses. So for example, if you know that you constantly will check your phone for Instagram, TikTok, whatever, delete the apps. Just delete the apps or put on app limits, put on do not disturb, make it hard as possible so you don't check those things. So this way you can focus on things that actually truly matter. And when you actually focus on IPAs, income producing activities, you actually then generate income because of that. But on top of that, when you are doing the right work and the right process, you build confidence. And your confidence is like a bank account. Everything you do either will add to it and make a deposit or will withdraw from it. And it's everything that you do. So, for example, if you said, all right, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm going to stretch, do yoga, and then I'm going to prepare my call list for 8. So once 8 o'clock hits, I'm going to be ready to go. Now, if 6 o'clock rolls around, your alarm goes off and you hit snooze, you just withdrew from your confidence account because you're like,
Mm.
oh, I didn't do that. If I didn't do that, I'm not going to be on the phone today. And before you know, you start spiraling and you have what I call automatic negative thoughts start crawling in your head. One negative thought crawls in, and then another, and then another, and then another. But if you understand that, you can actually help stop the ants from crawling in, and you can be proactive in shifting how you think.
Yeah. Yeah. How important do you think is registering success as well along that way? Because, you know, often we let the negative thoughts come in a bit more. And I'll give you a good example. Like, I might have a YouTube video. I have like a YouTube video that's doing pretty well at the moment, right? And it has like 400 comments. 398 will be positive, 2 will be negative, and naturally you'll hang to the 2, you know?
Sure.
But I think it's very important to be able to register positive things. Not necessarily someone clapping you on the back, but when you do get a success, like a discovery call, and when you do get you move it further on in the sales process, how important do you think it is just for, registering when you do things that are, successful or that are being positive? Because otherwise, yeah, I suppose you're always looking at maybe negatives and not valuing both sides of the coin.
Yeah, great question. Because the truth is, the reason we look for negatives is because that's how we're wired. Like we're wired from a safety perspective. We have thousands of years of programming in our brains that says, "Hey, danger! Like there might be a saber-toothed tiger behind you. You better watch out. You might get eaten." So naturally, we have this. It's instinctual. So we look for bad things. That's what happens. So when you understand that, then you realize, crap, like what you focus on expands. So I better change what I focus on. So one thing I recommend, this is for anything, because the mistake sometimes we make is even when we're trying to improve ourselves, like let's just say you listen to your own call recordings, we want to improve ourselves. It's very easy to find one thing wrong and then suddenly you're like, well, and then this and this and this and this and this and this. And before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible human being. What you're not. It's just because of what you're focused on. So this is actually why I recommend, every single day, especially this really helped me early on because I struggled with this. So every day, what I used to do after every sales call, not like a cold call, but after maybe a cold call session or an actual like discovery, I would just write down it was on a notebook, one win and one learning. That's it. What was one win? And that could be anything from I maintained tonality really well, even though they were tough on me. My opportunity was I didn't set a firm next step, whatever. So now at the end of the day, you might have 4 or 5, like, 4 or 5, it should match up, 4 or 5 wins, 4 or 5 opportunities to learn. So now you get like, okay, cool. Now you can recognize your progress. And
Mm.
when you can recognize your progress, that is absolutely vital because ultimately our motivation comes when we have our motivation comes when we have progress. When we don't recognize progress, we don't get motivated. It's kind of like if you're looking to lose weight and you're not measuring yourself every day, and then you just had a bad off day, you ate a bunch of unhealthy food, you're gonna beat yourself up. But if you actually haven't measured the data leading up to it, you're like, when you actually take a look at the data, you might be like, oh, you know what? I've actually been pretty healthy for this whole week. I had one bad day, not a big deal. I ate clean all week. I worked out every single day. Actually, it's fine. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So you should have a way to have a tight feedback loop of, wins and opportunities, but I'll make sure there's good balance as well where you don't beat yourself up. So this is actually why you should have a place where you keep track of everything. So like your wins, whether it's a gratitude journal, it could be anything, as long as you have a place to keep it so you can remind yourself of how great you truly are.
Yeah, it's small metrics as well along the way, and the diet is a fantastic thing. I actually spoke to someone in the gym yesterday about it, saying
Mhm.
the guy was like, he was like 50 and he was super fit, super healthy, and he's like, yeah, but on a Saturday, like I'll order like a massive pizza and I'll get like a beer or whatever, and I feel like shit as a result. It's like, mate, for 80% or 90% of the
Right.
week, you've killed it. You've been healthier than other 50% of 50-year-olds across the world, bear in
Right.
mind, and
Right.
for between 6 and 10 p.m. on a Saturday evening, you fall off. Like that's way better than falling off for the whole entire
Right.
period. So
That's right.
being able to understand those different areas, it's very important. It's a life thing. It's a life thing. I wanted to discuss here as well around a personal brand. So I had a podcast with a guy last week, and so myself and multiple few other kind of podcasters and individual kind of guys, we're all trying to grow our personal brand pretty well. We put a lot of time investment. I would even say money into it because we do production and things like this and whatnot,
Hmm.
right? And it kind of seems to be two schools of thought that I have discovered most recently. You have the kind of Justin Welch approach, which is, build a personal brand, pushing content, ICP content continuously, discovery call, moving down the sales funnel, whatnot. Then there's the other school of thought, which is like, just get the work done, get on the phones, get the messages done, get the outbound done. And maybe you don't need as much like kind of personal brand about it. How do you think about these two different kind of schools of thoughts? And what would be your kind of a recommendation here?
So it depends on probably the role you're in. I think it's important, right? Because if you're an entrepreneur versus a sales professional, you're going to have potentially some limits of what you can really do as well. Like as an entrepreneur, you have complete freedom. You do whatever the heck you want online. And sometimes like it's like, and you can also play the longer game, and in the sales world, it kind of depends. Like if you're planning to stay there for a long time or not. And if you're, and the personal brand can help for sure, but like, what are you, the mistake the mistake I see a lot of sales professionals make is they say, I want to build a personal brand, and they start posting about sales. But what they need to book discovery calls and close has nothing to do with sales, not sales software, not sales tech. Like they sell like, I don't know, CTOs or something. And I'm like, why are you, that makes zero sense. So understand like the content is a way to drive traffic. So if you're a sales professional and you're trying to build a brand around just you, it's low. I think it's way harder because with the content you're putting out there, you're not going to see the same ROI. Like if you're posting about sales content because you love sales and you love the game of sales, and you're selling the CTOs, some sort of cybersecurity solution, it's not, your content's not going to resonate. They won't want to connect with you. The DMs aren't going to make sense. Like it's just like it's like there's so much misalignment.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that's why Justin Welch, his style is spot on. It's very clear what he does. He wants to help people become a solopreneur. That's his big thing. Start a side hustle, become a solopreneur. That's his big thing, right? So that's all he talks about. That's all he talks about. And he's made a shift from talking about LinkedIn to just this. So now
Yeah.
he focuses on selling those other products. So it can definitely help you for sure. I think when done properly, it can be highly effective. Like we utilize content in a way to generate a lot of calls. Like we typically book between 2 to 5 calls every single day off LinkedIn automatically as part of our system, right? And we nurture people through all our content as well on LinkedIn as well. So it's all designed as a melting pot. And it's very niche content. That's why like typically the posts that I put out there don't necessarily go viral, because I'm not going for viral content. I'm going for, hey, I know what I'm doing, and I can help you achieve this goal.
Yeah.
So that's why my stuff will rarely go viral versus I like some other content creators. All they want to do is go viral. But then when I take a look at how much revenue they're actually generating, it's nothing. They don't actually have a business. They just have a hobby, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that. So when you use content right, it could really supercharge the business in a really good way and help you build omnipresence. So like, for example, in my opinion, if you want to use if you want to build a business, or if you're a sales professional and you're like, hey, I'm gonna be like, I just love cybersecurity, I'm gonna be selling them for probably next 5 years. and you want to build a brand around that, cool, for sure. Then you can really have a specific focus so people know exactly what you do. And you use content as a machine to help you generate book calls and book meetings. So I'll give you an example here. So, and the thing is, you can mix in personal flavor. So Samantha is one of my students in my program. She just started posting on LinkedIn. So she's selling basically it's a software that really helps with what is it, like clean energy emissions, something like that. So it's all electric vehicles and stuff like that. So she started like posting online, but she's not just posting, "Hey, we're doing this webinar on X. Come sign us." She's like posting personal pictures and like tying in EV very subtly inside. And she's getting leads. Like she texted me on Friday. She had someone from UPS reach out to her and say, "Hey, I saw your post. Let's talk." So she's getting inbound leads now because of the content she's putting out there, right? Because it's in alignment to what she's talking about. So when you do it right, it could be an absolute machine for you, as long as you are very clear with how you're doing it. And if you build proper sales funnels as well, it could really set you up for success. So that's playing a long game, though.
Of course, that's very interesting because like you have, some people who have side hustles and then their regular jobs. So like, let's say if you're working in a regular sales role, sometimes you can't even speak about that shit online anyway. It's
I couldn't.
internal,
Yeah.
exactly. It's internal
Yeah.
stuff, or maybe even if it was public, but if you were promoting the company, they wouldn't want you to do it because like they
Correct.
want copywriters to do it, they want marketers to do it. They don't want
Right.
people just saying it. These are the benefits or these are the testimonies. Maybe there's a content release schedule that a company is bound by because of legal issues. So there's
Right.
that aspect of it, and even in myself and working in like product and fintech, of course, like we can't be super, super loose. But then for
Yeah.
me, then I do have the other side of me, which is a kind of side hustle podcast, kind of consulting vibe in me, that when I do speak then and I get really clear on that ICP, which is like young professionals or podcast professionals that are trying to like launch or grow like that kind of side hustle, young people, that's when there's that alignment. So
Yes.
even in my a career, I don't necessarily look for product conversations to be started and opportunities, but it's interesting because like when you get better at it, just like you said at the very beginning, all of your strategy is around it, your content's around it, your discovery calls, your even outbound messages, they all follow a similar theme and tonality. And I think that just comes with time. Of course it comes with time,
Mhm.
but you see how that kind of lands. How important has LinkedIn been for you? Because like
Oh yeah.
I've seen I forget his name. Oh, Luke Matthews, you may be familiar with, a US
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
speaking last week about and I said this on my podcast last week too, about the higher valuations you see in LinkedIn, basically due to the user base, the salaries are higher, the overall interests are kind of around business and sales, and kind of like they're already focused their mind on something, as well as like the level of content that's produced there is very low. So as a result, you have a high, someone like yourself gets a lot of attention and impressions because of the fact that you're one of the few people that do it really well. Compare that to other platforms. TikTok, there's very little penetration. Same with Instagram. There's too much people on it. There's too much dilution. How important has it been for you?
So it depends on. So here's the thing. All the platforms work. So they all work. A lot of time when people are trying to build a business or trying to get prospects or clients or whatever, you have to go where the audience is really hanging out. That's an important thing, because the
Yep.
truth is, we've gotten clients off Instagram and Facebook, etc. We've gotten clients off LinkedIn. I don't do TikTok. We've got clients off YouTube, podcasts, whatever, all around. People Google me. So they come from all different sources. That's first piece. So they all
Yep.
work. I know that. But each one has its own strength. So the benefit a lot of times for a platform that's young, like a TikTok or YouTube or LinkedIn, is still pretty young as well, is you have further organic reach. So meaning the platform is not to a point where the creators of the platform, like a Facebook or Instagram, they can monetize that same level. So meaning like Facebook and Instagram, it still works, but paid traffic works way better, right? So that's why people on that site typically will build businesses utilizing paid traffic. On LinkedIn, the organic reach is still very, very good. So you can still post content out there and still get a lot of reach for free. So when you understand that, it's like you can kind of leverage each platform from what the benefits are, and leverage that to get the most opportunity from there. So in terms of like LinkedIn, so we use LinkedIn in a lot of different ways. So I do organic and I also do paid traffic as well. I do both. And that helps us from our top of the funnel work. So we'll do a lot. We'll do like inbound. We'll do outbound. We also do retargeting with ads as well, and we also do top of funnel lead generation too. So with that being said, when you understand that and you want to play the long game, that's how you want to decide which platform to really use. So mistake I think a lot of people make is they chase the shiniest thing, and they're able to get some organic growth really early on, and they get really pumped. And like, oh, cool! This is the best thing since sliced bread. That's what people have said for every single platform. So I started studying internet marketing back in 2015. At the time, Instagram was a big thing. Instagram and Facebook were still a big thing at that time. LinkedIn still was not to the level it is today. So early on, I captured a lot of attention early on because it's still organic. I'm like, this is pretty awesome. But then I also saw what happened. I'm like, really good, and then like this. And it's the same thing with LinkedIn. It's the same thing that's going to happen with TikTok. The same thing that's happened with every single platform. The only one that's really stood the test of time from a longevity perspective has been YouTube, probably because it's a Google platform. So that's why I've seen long-term wise. But what's interesting is when you go, if you actually study internet marketing, how long goes back, when you take a look at, say, how easy it was to rank back in like 2000 on Google, way easier. You can like game the system, and like people could get like super cheap ads, and organic was really good still back then. So people could just get found easily on Google. And that's why so many people made so much money back then. And then over time, the dot-com bubble burst, and it made it very hard. So now, and that's been the rise and fall of every platform, right? Rise and fall of every platform. So with that being said, I love LinkedIn, but I think what's important to understand is whatever audience you're going after, you need a way to be able to reach them. And that's why it's really important to actually collect leads nonstop. So that's why it's like collecting their data, collecting their information, because then from there, then you're able to still get a hold of them. So that way, if the platform went down, you could still book calls, you can still close deals, you can still make money. Otherwise, the mistake I made early on, and this was a huge mistake, was I started building on 2015 in Instagram, build this audience up, at the time, it was a big deal. To get to 10,000 followers is a big deal. So I got 10,000 followers. Oh, it's pretty cool. Like that was a huge back then. And I didn't really do a good job with collecting leads, data, etc. And I remember a couple years later, I did a launch, and I only had maybe 300 leads total. I had email lists and maybe 300 emails. I built a course, my first course I ever made. Did a launch. I was still corporate America. Did a launch. I woke up and made $2,000. And I was still blown away. I made $2,000 from that list. But I thought to myself, I'm like, dang, huh? And I can already tell at that time, the organic is already going down. Anyways, I'm like, if only I was smarter about collecting leads over the last 2 years in the organic reach. So that's why, like once I started leveraging LinkedIn, because my company wasn't cool with me using LinkedIn, so I had to wait till I quit corporate America and started doing that. I immediately started focusing on generating leads and capturing leads. And that was really key. So now it's like, cool. Like if LinkedIn goes down, which has happened, like I'm not worried. I could fire off an email, book 15 calls in like 2 hours, and we'll close 4 or 5 of them.
That's crazy. It's really the kind of systemic kind of risk from a platform. And I've had, even from my podcast, I've had 2 Instagram accounts deleted. I wasn't selling OnlyFans stuff. I wasn't doing any of that. They just popped. I don't know what happened. Rumor has it that the emails were hacked from a different website that I was using, and they could put through like a churner where they like report images to get your account taken down. But regardless, this has kind of gone back to that premise of when you do have opportunities, you do have leads, you want to bring them off the platform. Have them, and you can keep it simple on a mailing list. Very very simple.
That's it.
Now, you can do a lot of things with that, of course. That's a whole another podcast about how to retarget and target. But it's very interesting because like we get so caught up on platforms depending on followers and trying to grow that we don't think like the broader picture. And you've mentioned playing the long game a couple of times, which is a very interesting thing. So young people, all people, want things quickly. They want things now. We see things that happen really quickly too. Now we are influenced by others, and it looks like other people are crushing it and building it. But for me, I've been really trying to play a long game, mainly investing in that kind of personal brand, and I build a whole suite of maybe kind of services around that. How for you has that kind of change been especially as you left corporate America and now do you have time to play more longer game? What are some of the factors you consider?
Yeah, so every decision I make is long-term wise, right? Which is really, really key. So I think the first piece to understand is like when you're playing the long game, oftentimes you are giving up something now for something greater later. And it's really, really important to understand because otherwise, but you have to put yourself in a position where you can make those decisions. And when I talk about from like an entrepreneur perspective, it's like giving up cash today to make more cash later, right? So when you start thinking this way, you make different decisions. So I'll give you a real good example. So, I primarily will only work with direct people who are actually in the field, account executives, BDRs, etc., versus going after corporate trainings. I actually don't like corporate trainings at all. It's only because I know if I do a corporate training, if it's 100 people there, 10% will take action and then get crazy results. 20% will say it sounds awesome and take no result, take no action, and 70% will just not even want to be there. So that's not enjoyable. I don't enjoy that personally, right? I much rather just work the 10% that are going to crush it anyways, right? And just work them directly. They're much more grateful. They're happier, better results. So when I knew that, when I started my business, that meant when I would get approached, which still happens, even with the content put out there, I get inbound leads from people say, hey, Marcus, can you come train our team, 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, whatever. And it's good money. It's like, hey, cool. Like, do like maybe a month's worth of work and make 50 to 100 grand. Okay, that's cool. Sounds great. But I don't want it because I have to trade time for money, right? Which I don't want to do. I want time freedom. And also I want to work with the best people. So when you understand that, you make different decisions. So is that hard turning down someone for 6 figures? For sure. That's hard for anybody, right? But it's only because I'm going to focus my energy and time on things that are really going to matter, right? So here's another example of a long-term play. So, and I see it like, I look at my competition, other sales coaches out there, they all play the short game. They're all going for like the quick money, the easy stuff. They don't play the long game, right? So what they do is they focus on doing stuff like, let me just like kind of post on LinkedIn and hopefully they build my business. They don't collect leads. They don't do all these things that I know are going to pay long term. Let me go on TikTok and try to make cool videos and and try to be all funny and stuff. That's all great, but again, there's no long term with that. So when I started 2022, once I had I took a look at some of the data of like where all my leads come from, right? I was like, all our closed deals come from. I'm like, all our closed deals come from, we'll get a lot from LinkedIn. We'll get people that will say that they found me on YouTube. Now, in January this year, I didn't have a YouTube channel. So I started that about 2 months ago. But people would find me doing other interviews that were on YouTube. And they would start binge watching. They would Google me, start binge watching the video. I'm like, oh wow, it makes sense. Like there's all these videos on me on YouTube. They'd watch it and they'll say, wow, I love your stuff. Found you on YouTube, even though it wasn't my channel. So I'm like, okay, that's a sign, the feedback loop. Hey, I probably should get on YouTube, right? So I'm like, okay, long term, and I know YouTube's a long game. It's not like, hey, I start posting videos overnight, it'll be viral. I'm like, this is probably a 5-10 year play, like a 5-10 year play for YouTube, for the SEO, the everything. So that being said, I'm like, that's gonna be one big play from a long-term perspective. The second big play, because we actually have 0 low-ticket products. So we don't sell a course by itself. Everything we have is high ticket, right? Because we deliver massive results, so we charge for that. So we don't have anything that's like, our lowest offer is like still almost 5 figures, right? So we don't have anything low ticket. Now, that definitely cuts out a lot of people that just simply cannot, even though we have funding and all these things, we have ways to get people in the program. Some people just simply are not going to be in a spot to be able to get the program. And a lot of people want something low ticket. So I'm like, okay, well, the number one thing to build authority, it's going to be long lasting, that lasts beyond a video sales letter, a webinar, a YouTube video, is a book. So now writing a book, right? So again, long-term play, not short-term. Yep. Like the book now, we're 29,000 words in, it'll be done within 2 months. And once that's done, we'll launch that book as a low ticket offer for people. So with that being said, now we're kind of, that book is going to be down and rolled out. And now people can also enjoy that book, which will have longevity. Now we're not going to see it overnight. So people can like buy millions of copies. The goal is not to sell millions of books. I don't care about that. It's they're going to read the book, be impacted. And once they're ready to like get better, like, pay more for coaching, that book's on the bookshelf. They're thinking Marcus Chan's a guy. And they're going to be like, I'm going to call his team.
Man, that's the best approach ever. That's literally the best approach, because like you start off, of course, with your higher product that you want, because you don't want to be traded in that time, man.
That's right.
You have a family, whatever, and you want to work with those top level people. But There is the margin in between that when you build something that scales, even if it is a physical book or whatever, that can just be your interim period. I think that's the
That's it.
best way. It's literally the best way. And I've always been thinking about that because you have the high ticket people. And I had a call yesterday and someone was like, is there any way we could do like a discount? And even for my time, I actually just can't. I was genuinely, I just like, I don't have
Mhm.
enough time to be able to like
Yeah.
do this. But in my head, I'm always like, if I can just get that intermediate product, not now, like over the next couple of quarters, it's the best way, and it's a longevity play. And when you're
Mhm.
always thinking, and I think the best way to do that is to zoom out as well, and
That's it.
you made a fantastic point there as well about focusing your energy on the bigger ones. Now, I suppose the argument for this, the younger person would say that they don't have the authority and the responsibility, which is fair. But this is where I just say, fuck that. Just put your best foot forward. I'm nowhere near as experienced as some other guys out there, but you try your best, you put yourself there forward, position yourself well in the industry, and then over the long run, then because it only builds, man. And YouTube is a great point you said. So a lot of people I
And
work with,
and here's the thing, right? So like, so for some people out there, like, yeah, I don't have the authority on whatever. You can document your journey. Like those are some of the best posts I've read. Best posts, best video. Like people like, hey, here I am. I'm a brand new SDR. I made 100 calls a day. I got my face smashed in. Any advice? Love those posts. People are like, oh,
100%, yeah,
do this, try this. I'm like, cool. Like, and the thing is like, then you get better writing copy, right? You get better at
yeah,
writing copy. You start getting better at all these things. So putting yourself out there, like learning how to do things that are uncomfortable for you, pays you in the long term.
yeah. And man, one thing to note on that as well is that so I write again, every day pretty much like writing small copy, whether it's my podcast or LinkedIn, whatever. I'm actually dyslexic. Would you believe that? So when I was
Mm,
younger, I was really poor at writing.
no, man.
Not like
Yeah.
it's not very severe, but it would be, I just would have like small grammar issues and whatnot, and I just forced myself, like literally brute force, to
That's
get
it.
better. I wasn't like trying to like read like a grammar book, but I was just like always writing, always improving. I actually got Grammarly as well recently and constantly just trying to operate and just kind of improve. And it's been very, very just interesting. That's that one small example,
I
one
love
very
that.
small example. And what's really cool there as well, man, you were saying about like YouTube, right? So, there's actually a really good guy that was called Mike Winnett who actually spoke really well about this. He was saying that everyone gets caught up on LinkedIn or Instagram, right? The timeline of those posts are so short. They might
Oh
go
yeah.
for 48 hours max,
Right.
okay, and they crash off. But the thing with YouTube is that it's the gift that keeps on giving. If
That's
your
right.
content is good, it will keep on coming
Mhm.
around, especially when you make evergreen stuff. So I was checking out your channel the other day and I saw that you make like proper evergreen content, which again
Mhm.
will be relevant 5 years
Right.
from now.
That's
And it's
exactly
it's
right.
amazing. It's amazing. Like, and the best example of that is Tim Ferriss wrote
Mhm.
a blog with it before that he
Perfect.
put up
Yeah.
he made a podcast called um practical advice for someone who like wanted to commit suicide. Okay, it was a very
Mm.
intense like post, but that to this day I think gets like 10,000 downloads a day or something. It's something like absolutely crazy because
Right.
it is something so extreme. It is something
Mhm.
that is always around. It's been around since the dawn of time. It's been around, it
Mhm.
will be around unfortunately for many more years to come.
Mhm.
And that simple piece of content has always been coming back around because people struggle with it, people have a pain point, and people read through a practical advice and hopefully end up in a better position at the very end of it.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
it's crazy, man. We got to kind of think a little bit different. Don't think
Yeah, oh,
short
yeah.
term.
Well, when you think about this, like everything that we have in our life that's probably we appreciate the most, we probably didn't get immediately. Whether
Yeah.
it's learning a new sport, learning a new game, if we pursued a guy, a girl, or whatever
Yeah.
it was, like we end up appreciating it so much more. And when you realize that the average person again gives up easily, it becomes a competitive advantage to not give up, to be able to be so consistent. Like I
Mhm.
think about like any sport that I've done, I've usually been the worst to start, but I've been the most consistent to show up, to try to get better, just a little better every day, and just work at it every single day. And over time, eventually, I was able to get better than the most talented people. Not because I was talented, but only because I was just trying to get better every single day. That's all it was. It just added up.
Yeah. It's just a compound effect, and that's the best
That's
thing
right.
about anything you do online, even if your sales process, even in podcasting. Everybody wants it right now, and then they all suck in the beginning because everyone does suck. Because when you get onto a microphone, you speak like this, and you feel very awkward and whatnot.
Oh
After
yeah.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50 episodes, you get better. And then what you realize is that everyone that started with you, they've all given up. They've all
That's
just
right.
gone off and done other things. And then you just end up being that kind of industry leader, industry expert. And you know what? You may not even be the best or get the most out of it. I think this is very fascinating as well, as that you don't need the best numbers, conversion, let's say, or
Hmm.
engagement on LinkedIn to be, highly profitable or have a successful business or or change someone's life in particular. You can have a smaller podcast or business, whatever, and it can do exceptionally well. So it's the
Hmm.
perception that we need it to be, oh, like, in the light and everyone thinks we're amazing and we're on Instagram, we're getting 10,000 likes a photo. That's actually not success. It's treating the importance of not just followers, but engagement, impressions, click throughs, getting through
Hmm.
the nitty gritty metrics, not just the vanity metrics, not just the
That's
vanity
right.
metrics.
That's
That's
right.
a good way to look at it.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs or, just people that they chase the virility of like posts. I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, for sure. I get like, yeah, if you get viral, like, yeah, you might like gain 100 more followers or whatever. But how many turn into leads? Well, like any post I put out there where it just blew up in like views and like likes and comments, the amount of leads I get it's very minimal in terms of increase. Like
yeah,
I track it every single. I know every single how many leads we get every single day. I'm like, it's not like we overnight suddenly we double. It's like, no, it's like, yeah, maybe we got like 5 times the views, but maybe we got 5% more leads.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not direct correlation.
Crazy, man. Crazy. I want to finish up on some areas you said around there around your content, especially what I wanted to see. So some of your posts are absolutely amazing. And one thing I wanted to finish up was around that kind of airplane test, the airplane
Mm,
model, which I thought was very
yes.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
you spoke about this earlier in the beginning too. So a lot of SDRs or anyone in general, even tech entrepreneurs or whatever, get very caught up in their product. They love their product. And Alex Lieberman, the guy from Morning Brew, he
Mhm.
made a fantastic video about this the other day. He was saying that the best thing that he's done as an entrepreneur, or the best skill that he's acquired, has the ability to
Mhm.
sell more than anything else. His brand, his product, his experience, everything, more than any sort of theory or thesis or anything like this. How important do you think it is to, well, firstly, I'd like you to explain that airplane test, but not focus on features and focus on the benefits instead, because I do find that even myself, I focus too much on the processes that I want to sell versus the actual outcome.
Yeah, and great question. I think, and this ties back into some of the challenges we get trained on, especially in a lot of companies, is you get trained on product knowledge, right? So you get like, hey, here's like 1,000 benefits or 1,000 features. Like, show them everything on the demo. You show them, like, talk about it on the call, talk about everything. And the truth is, in general, when you talk to like an actual decision maker, the features aren't what sell it. It's what do they get out of it, right? What's the big desired result they get out of it? So in the airplane example, is when you think about when you travel and I don't know if people still read the magazine. They usually have magazines in the front little cubby or in front of the seat in the cover. You grab the magazine. If you open the magazine up, when you flip through the airline magazine, they're going to show like all the amazing places you can fly to. Whether it's like you can fly to like Milan, you can fly to London, you can fly to Greece, you can fly to New York City, fly to Hawaii, Miami. They show all these amazing places, and they show you all the amazing restaurants. They show you the happy families. They show you like the intimate dates, the nice places they can go visit, all the experiences. Only the very back will it show like 1 or 2 pages of the specs on a plane. All right. And the reason they do that is because they want you to associate, hey, when I fly with Alaska Airlines, when I fly with Turkish Airlines, when I fly with whatever airline, I'm gonna go have these amazing experiences. So when you're on there, you're not thinking about I paid $1,000 for the seat to sit here and look to look at X number of seats and have like I don't know like go this fast in the air. You're like, hey, like I'm here to go on my amazing vacation with my family to have a great experience. So a lot of times that ties back into sales because are we trying to sell the features of the plane, the number of seats, the number of engines, or are we trying to showcase the destination, the end result they want to get? And the top sales professionals understand that. So they're always leading with the end result
Mhm.
because that's what they ultimately want. So it's understand the difference between what do they want versus what do they need. So
Mm.
you sell them what they want, but you give them what they need. And I'll tie it back to my own business. So reps don't want sales training. They don't want sales coaching. They want to be confident in what they're doing. They want to max out the comp plan. They want financial freedom. They want to be seen as an expert on a team. They want their peers to look at them like, wow, you're incredible. How did you do that? They want all those things that come when you crush it in sales. What they need is sales training and coaching. But I don't post about that. I don't say, hey, you need sales training and coaching. I'll just post about the big desired results they want because I know that's what they want. And then I'll give them what they need, right? So it's like when you go to the doctor, you don't want to take medicine or have surgery. You want to feel better. So they sell you what you want and they give you what you need. And when you start thinking that way, you start changing how you pitch and how you pitch, how you run your calls, to how you run discoveries, to everything. And the mistake a lot of people make is even their discoveries are feature focused. They get on a call, cool. So like, all right, what software are you using for your HRIS? How many employees do you have? What are you guys currently using? All right, cool. So like, do you have any problems with it? Like what are you talking? What's happening now? And then they get a proposal, they send it out, and then they get ghosted, right? So when you understand that, you start shifting away from the features, and you focus on what are the big pains, what's the opportunity cost if they don't take action, what are their wants, needs, and desires, and you start uncovering the key things that actually make them want to take action. And when you do it that way, that's how you actually close them.
I love that, man. I think that's literally the best advice I could literally ever get, to be honest, because I think we all get caught up so much in the features because we think that's what people want, you know? They want better performance out of this product, they want better speed, they want better reliability or whatever. They just don't want the product to break when they're doing their other shit, you know?
Yeah. So think
Um,
about even the first like iPod when it came out. Like I think like Steve Jobs, Apple, amazing. So when the first like MP3 players came out, right? They were like, hey, here's the MP3 player. It can hold like 1,000 songs. Cool. Okay, very feature heavy. Like you can access your songs at any times. And Steve Jobs, when he came out with the iPod, what did he say? I think he said something like, here's 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's what people wanted. 1,000 songs in their pocket. Now that gives you emotion. Now it makes you think. And that's why Apple's been wildly successful. That's what they do. Everything they do is experience. Like when you compare their products compared to anything else, arguably there are actually better products out there.
Yeah.
But it's an experience. It's cult like now, right? Like if you don't have an iPhone, you stand out now, right? This is what happens.
Yeah.
So if you have an Android, sorry, but that's just reality. People now
Of
know.
course.
Like if you're in a group chat and everyone's got iMessage stuff for you. I used to be the Android guy. I'm like, oh man, this is all green bubbles now. I ruined this. So
Yeah, you're dead. I mean, that's changed my perspective, even how I frame products.
Mhm.
Like even from a product perspective, like someone who develops stuff, like even like how the copy, how everything is adjusted when you
Mhm.
focus on stuff like that. So it's an amazing approach. I don't want to keep you too long, but I want you to just tell me where people can find your stuff. So for context, I'll have everything in the show notes, from your LinkedIn to all your trainings, your academy and stuff like that. So don't feel like you're going to run away without it. So they'll all be in there. But where can people find you?
Cool. Super easy. Just look me up on LinkedIn, Marcus Chan, or head to sixfiguresalesacademy.com for a bunch of free trainings there too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, man.